I wanted to take this time to share my story of how and why I decided to become a celibate Catholic priest. It's interesting because I never really thought about being a priest when I was younger. My experience of my Catholic faith when I was younger was not necessarily the most positive. So throughout my life, my family and I went to Mass each Sunday. And a lot of times, as maybe other Catholics would say too, is that my experience of my Catholic faith was boring and unengaging. I will say that there was at times a peace that I experienced with it, looking back, but overall there was that confusion. Something else that characterized my faith growing up was doubt. Even since I was a child, I would have these doubts of, is God even real? And there were times where it did not seem like God was real. And that would happen from time to time. I wasn't a declared atheist, but I had these doubts. And then as I went into high school, I started to have those doubts even more. I remember there were days where I just woke up and would just feel like God wasn't real. And there was this great emptiness inside of me and this sort of hopelessness. I had a hard time, really fully entering into the day knowing that I was just an accident of evolution, and then eventually anything that I would do or anything anyone else would do would just eventually become nothing. And again, I would still go to Mass, and there would still be times I'd experience the peace of being a practicing Catholic Christian. But again, that doubt was something that characterized my faith life. As I went into college, I was not certainly thinking about being a priest, because if I don't even know with much certainty that God is real, if I don't really know why I believe in Jesus, if I don't really know why I'm a Catholic Christian, I'm not going to think about being a priest. So I went to school to study chemistry, and I went to Lakeland College and a semester at Eastern Illinois University. In this time of college, I sort of came to terms with these doubts a little bit more. One awesome thing in this time frame was that I experienced the joy and how fulfilling it was to be part of a Christian brotherhood. So I worked with some guys at Culver's, and I studied with some guys at Lakeland, and there was something valuable about having Christian friends who are pursuing a moral life and pursuing this higher cause. And there was a deep connection I felt with those people and a greater joy. Although I still had these doubts in my mind. Is Jesus God? Was Jesus even really real? Am I Catholic just because I happen to be born into a Catholic family? So I still had these questions in my mind. Eventually it came to the point in time where I listened to this talk by a Catholic speaker, and he talked about how in life many people pursue pleasure as happiness. And then he talked about how, pleasure isn't happiness because it only satisfies us for the moment we receive that pleasure. He said the things that God wants for us and the things that most fulfill us are the things that help us to become the best version of ourselves, is what he says. And there was something about that resonated with me, that when I was living for something deeper, when I was pursuing a moral life, there was something fulfilling about that. When I did things that were truly good for me, there was something fulfilling about that. The other thing I took away from that talk was he said that we become the books we read. And this stood out to me because I did not read hardly any books at all. I think maybe from the freshman year in high school to maybe a year or two after high school had ended, or a year or two into college, I'd read one book, and that was a book on physical fitness. So I had not really read anything more profound than that. I only read what was basically absolutely required for school. So I was like, I'm going to find a book to read. And I had heard my friends talk about this author, C.S. Lewis, so I looked him up, and then I just chose a random book, and the book was called Mere Christianity. Mere Christianity made a huge impact on my life because it was really a time for me to see an intelligent and beautiful presentation of Christianity. It was not the sole purpose of the book, but he talks about how there's reasons to believe in God, and there's reasons to believe that Jesus is God, and reasons to believe in Christianity. And that resonated with me because I thought faith just had to be this blind thing where I had to close my eyes and cross my fingers, and I just hoped what I believe. I just had to hope my beliefs were true, basically. And that was something different in this book, that there's more reason and intelligence behind it. And that really stirred up desire in me. After reading Mere Christianity, I started engaging in a lot more resources, a lot more books, talks, and even debates. I came to see that there are reasons why I believe in God, philosophical reasons, supported by scientific evidence. There's reasons to believe that Jesus wasn't just a made-up person, that he wasn't, his death and resurrection was not just some lie by a group of religious fanatics, basically. I became more convinced of my beliefs through reason. And again, like I said before, I previously thought faith was something blind, but I started to see that it didn't have to be that way, that faith and reason and faith and science work very well together. Something that stood out to me in particular was I would watch debates with Christians and atheists. Now, previously I was super scared, basically, to hear what an atheist would have to say about God. I think there was this fear that the atheist had this sort of secret answer. I knew a lot of them were scientists. Maybe they knew some sort of science that I didn't know. And they were really only they were the brave ones to admit that God wasn't real. So I eventually did, like I said, watch these debates with Christians and atheists, and I was so surprised by how overwhelmingly powerful the case for Christianity was. That Christianity was very reasonable. Not only in the sense that there were reasons to believe in it, but that it was actually much more reasonable than atheism. And that atheism was actually very unreasonable. And then eventually, with all this conviction of truth of Christianity and God's existence, I sort of took the next step. If this is true, what does that mean for how I should live my life? There's a quote from C.S. Lewis in the book Mere Christianity that I mentioned before, and he says this: "Christianity, if true, is of infinite importance. If false, it is of no importance. The only thing it cannot be is moderately important." That if God is real and he created us for himself and he sent his son Jesus to die for us and he rose from the dead and he wants a relationship with us, if this is all true, this has to radically change my life. And I know for myself and many other Christians, Christianity is something moderately important. It's something you do on Sunday. It forms the way you believe in some level, but I realize that I have to fully commit myself to this truth because it's true. Through this process as well, I became more convinced of my beliefs as a Catholic specifically. And I can't go into all the details, but basically it came down to this, of why I'm Catholic. So Jesus came to reveal the Father. He came to reveal God the Father. And Jesus did signs and miracles to point to the fact that he was sent from God. And Jesus would do these things and he would say, "These miracles and signs show that I am sent from the Father and that the Father and I are one." He says that he has the same authority as the Father. So that if someone wants to believe in God the Father, if someone wants to believe in God, they have to believe and follow Jesus. Now Jesus takes this same logic and he applies it to his apostles. He applies it to his church. So then he goes on to say that, he who believes in you, he who accepts you, accepts me, and then accepts God my Father. And then he who rejects you actually rejects me and rejects God my Father. And Jesus entrusted his authority to his apostles and to his church. Jesus didn't write the Bible. He didn't tell us everything that we needed to know, but he started his church to continue his work. And the question came down to, well, what church was that? Or which church was that? And I actually became convinced through the testimony of a lot of Protestants or non-denominational Christians who had converted to Catholicism, who said, well, I studied these earliest Christians after the New Testament and the New Testament as well, but I studied these early Christians of the early centuries, and I came to see that they look really Catholic, and they believe things that Catholics believe, and that there's this continuity between the New Testament and the Catholic Church, and that the Bible itself that all Christians hold dear was actually the canon of which books go in the Bible was actually decided by a council of the Catholic Church. So I became more convinced as a Catholic in that way. In this time in college, I became more convicted as a Christian and a Catholic, but not necessarily, didn't really have the desire to be a priest until my last girlfriend and I broke up. Then the thoughts of priesthood sort of came to mind, and I felt God calling me to join seminary to become a Catholic priest. And I did not hear an audible voice, but God often speaks through our thoughts, feelings, and desires. And there was this constant thought of go to seminary, become a priest. There was this desire that this seems like an attractive possibility now, and it's becoming more and more something that I want. And there's this feeling of peace and excitement and joy when I thought about going to join the seminary. So eventually I talked to the priest at the Newman Center at Eastern Illinois University, Father John Titus, and I told him that, hey, I think I want to join seminary. And he was very surprised because he said that my brother Chris had actually been there the week before, and my brother Chris had told him that he wants to be his priest as well. So I never told my brother I would ever thought about being a priest. He never told me, but we came to the same priest within a week of each other saying the same thing. So we both joined seminary at the same time. A big thing to discern when deciding to become a Catholic priest and making the decision to go to seminary was this whole question of celibacy. Now, when I chose to study to become a priest, I was attracted to be a priest, but it wasn't that I wasn't attracted to marriage. Now, I think sometimes people think that, well, if you're joining the seminary, if you want to be a priest, then that means you don't want to be married. No, like marriage has always been attractive. It's always seemed like a beautiful thing. I wasn't, giving up on dating, but I just had this call to be a priest. But there was still that attraction to marriage, and I still thought marriage was a great thing. I would like to explain why is it that priests are celibate. So the first reason is simply that Jesus himself was celibate. Jesus himself was not married. And Jesus also says that in Matthew 19 that there are those who are eunuchs because they were born that way. There are people who are eunuchs, not married, because others made them that way. And then he said there's a third category, those who make themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of God. So that's what Jesus himself did. And Jesus is portrayed as the bridegroom or the husband of the church, or the husband of sinful humanity. So Jesus didn't want to limit his love to one woman, but he wanted his spousal love to extend universally to all of humanity. Also, when priests or religious sisters or religious brothers become celibate, they imitate Jesus, who is celibate, and that lifestyle points to what life will be like in heaven. It's a very strange thing, but Jesus says that there will be no marriage in heaven, and that all of us will be married to God in heaven. Heaven is described as a wedding banquet. All of humanity is married to God. So when priests are celibate, they're pointing to what our future existence will be like in heaven. And they're starting to live that deep exclusivity with God now here on earth. Not only do priests become husbands to the church, they imitate Jesus in being the bridegroom, but they also become spiritual fathers. I know that I was walking out of church one day and I saw a beautiful family in the front. There was, I think, maybe 5 or 6 kids. And I heard God sort of say to me in a simple way that, Michael, 6 kids aren't enough for you. That you need to be a father of a whole parish, or a father of many people in the church. And to become a father to all. And that really stuck with me, and it's been so fulfilling. Even though it's not the same as being a biological father, being a spiritual father is very fulfilling. With celibacy, there's this question of, is it really healthy though? It seems like you're repressing these good human desires. It just seems like an unhealthy to sort of, to not get married, basically. I can say from my experience with utter certainty that I've never felt more happy, healthy, joyful, integrated in my life. That my experience of celibacy has been very healthy and very fulfilling, and I feel more myself than ever. So that's not to say that married people can't be healthy, happy, can't be themselves, but you can have that too. You can have that too as a celibate person. I would like to end this video sharing a reflection on priesthood by a man named Father Patrick Schultz. O priest of Jesus Christ, you will never have had the hand of a loving spouse to clasp in yours, but daily your simple fingers will tenderly grip the humility of God veiled by bread. You will never abruptly rise to soothe the cries of a wailing infant, nor stand athwart to monsters beneath the bed. But often enough, you will go whenever summoned to the bedside of the dying, to comfort and anoint perspiring foreheads, chasing away real monsters. You will never comfort a sick third grader home from school with the flu, but you will don your stole to console and absolve countless sin-sick children who long to be healed. You will never cherish a little princess who will steal your heart and wrap you around her little finger, but you will introduce countless souls to the Prince of Peace who sacrificed all for them. You will never have to stay up late worried sick about the kids, but you will always be searching the horizon, poised to run out and meet the prodigals who have wandered far from home. You will never read bedtime stories, but nightly you will intercede for your children, praying for their protection and peace. You will never watch your bride walk down the aisle with tears in her eyes for you, but you will stand at the foot of the altar as Christ's bride approaches to consummate in Holy Communion. You will never grow old with the one you love, but the one you love will make you ever new. My God, what a life! It is yours, O priest of Jesus Christ.